arrogance together, and that's a deadly combination. All my writings talk about the biblical prophetic narrative in some way. And I truly believe, Kevin, that we are in a window of time that is absolutely unprecedented, unlike any other time in all of history. And it ain't going away.
Okay, now that's very interesting. And just very quickly before we get started, your views on organized religion as well.
Oh, say that again. I was what?
Sorry, your views as well on organized religion.
Here's the deal. Anytime a bunch of human beings get together and decide to make something organized, it usually screws up at some point. And that's the case, unfortunately, with Christianity. However, the experience of being a Christian, of being born from the spirit of a living God, right, it still goes on today, in spite of the best machinations of men to do otherwise. Jesus was faced with the same thing in his day. And that's why he talks, that's why he cleanses the temple with a whip. It's the same nonsense. Nothing has changed in 2,000 years. The bottom line is this: the experience is real. The experience is true. And there are still pockets, there are remnants of Christianity out there, and there are great pastors all over the globe, which love the Lord, love the Lord's work, and are just, trying to get people's lives together. And my hat is off to them, bully for them. But there's also a ton of nonsense that goes along with that.
Okay. I just needed to get that in there before we start. Very interesting. Now let's go straight into the book. What has led you to do this latest book?
There's an ancient biblical prophetic text, again, told us 2,000 years ago. And the backstory to this, which your listeners need to understand, is simply this. Yeshua, Jesus, by the way, his real name is Yeshua. That's his name in the Hebrew. It's from Yeshua to the Greek is Iesus Christos, and then from Iesos you get Jesus. That's how it works. So in the Greek, it's Yeshua. I'm sorry, the Hebrew, it's Yeshua. When you translate it to the Greek, it's Iesus, and then from Iesus you get Jesus. See the way that works? So, people have a tough time with this. So I bounce back and forth between all three. To keep it simple, we'll just call him Jesus. But when I use the word Jesus, sometimes people have a lot of negative connotations with that. They think organized religion, or the Pope with funny hats and confessionals, and, the Crusades and the Inquisition. That's not who we're talking about. That's all the machinations of men. The Crusades has nothing to do with being born from above by the Spirit of a living God. In my humble, the Inquisition certainly has nothing to do with the God of the Bible. Period. Zero. Nada. They're literally black marks on Christianity cooked up in Hell's Kitchen. But I digress. So the bottom line is this: there's a prophecy by Jesus about 2,000 years ago, and the backstory is a bunch of his disciples come up and go, "Hey, what's it going to be like at the end of the age, at the end of the world?" And so remember, at this moment in time, there is no Christian church. There are no cathedrals, monks with funny haircuts, rosaries, stained glass windows, confessionals, May parades, Christmas trees. Nothing exists. It's just this one guy and a handful of people with him. And the first thing he says is, the first thing out of his mouth is, "Don't let anyone deceive you. Many will come in my name and tell you that they are the Messiah. Don't be deceived." It's like, what? I mean, what do you think? Many will come. Who do you think you are to make a statement like that? Many will come in your name, telling it that, are you kidding me? That statement by itself is so filled with hubris, it's unbelievable. It's off the charts. Unless, of course, he's really the God, the real God, okay? And so he tells us, that's the first thing. Many will come in my name. Check. Look at the historical record. How many people have come and claimed to be the return of Jesus? Then he says, there'll be wars and rumors of wars, famines, pestilence, earthquakes in diverse places, men fainting from fear for what is coming upon the earth, troublesome times. Even the elect would be deceived if that were possible. That's what he tells us. And I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but that's what he warns us of. So with that in mind, it's a checklist. And he says, when you see these things begin to happen, don't freak out. And I'm paraphrasing, obviously. Don't freak out. Don't build a bomb shelter. Look up, because that means my return is imminent. So the whole idea of days, the nexus for the days of chaos, is specifically that scripture verse. And then look at chapter 1, earthquakes in diverse places. Chapter 2, wars and rumors of wars. Chapter 3, troublesome times. 4, one world government. 5, Fukushima disaster. 6, false Christ and other messiahs. 7, financial collapse. 8, the rise of lawlessness. 9, fish and animal die-off. Blood curse on the land. The 1 billion abortions on the planet. The so-called Marian apparitions. Famines where one child dies on this planet every 30 seconds. The burgeoning UFO phenomena. The coming great deception. The great falling away. The global rise of anti-Semitism, and of course 9/11, a Luciferian conspiracy. You bet your boots, in my opinion. Those are the chapters in the Days of Chaos, and then we sit down in the DVD by the same name, Days of Chaos, and interview some of the world's leading experts and all sorts of, like Dr. Brooks Agnew about the electromagnetic pulse weapon and the threat of that. So that's the nexus of the book, and also it spills over into the DVD.
Yes, yes, okay. And I can tell that you're very passionate about what you've been doing.
No, Kevin, what gave it away?
But I also know by speaking to you off air what a nice person you are as well, and I can see that your authentic Christian side comes out there as well, and I recognize that. Okay, with where we're heading in the world right now, then you really do feel that what has been prophesied is coming true, that Revelations is happening as far as you're concerned.
It's not the book of Revelation yet. No, we are not in the 7-year period known as the time of Jacob's trouble. We're not in the book of Revelation. This is the prelude. This is the birth pangs which lead up to the birth of the tribulation, the time of Jacob's trouble, as it's called. If we look at what's going on in the Middle East, and we have to understand, and first of all, the whole rise of anti-Semitism, the fact that the Jews have been gathered back into their ancient homeland, which was prophesied thousands of years ago. And people go, well, the Palestinians and all this stuff. They don't know history. They haven't read history. They don't understand. The entire Middle East was carved up by the Ottoman Empire. All those countries that we see did not exist before World War I. All of the countries of Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, or Israel, Jordan, Iraq, and even parts of Egypt were under the control of the Ottoman Empire until 1917, after World War I, when they lost the war because they sided with Germany. France and Britain came in and carved up the area and created the new states of Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Jordan, and Israel, although Israel was called Palestine at the time. And by the way, at the time it was called Palestine, there were no Palestinians. The Arabs refused to call themselves Palestinians because it was a negative term. The bottom line is this whole idea of a Palestinian nation is an absolute canard. It's a ruse, in my humble opinion. These people, there is no such, Palestinians are nothing more than Arabs. They're not distinguished from any other race of Arabs. And the fact is that the Balfour Declaration, when people says it's a Illuminati conspiracy to make this Israel, and for this whole Illuminati synagogue of Satan nonsense, it's absolute nonsense. Read history and understand that at the end of World War II, there was a blockade to keep the Jews from coming back into Israel. And the blockade was done by the English. And some of the ships were sent back into Europe, and some of these same people that had just been rescued from the camps were interred back in exactly the same camps. They were no longer death camps, but nonetheless, they were being confined in an area. So people really need to understand the history of the Middle East and understand that there is no two-state solution. There never will be a two-state solution, because what the Arabs want is every Jew out of Palestine, out of Israel. That's all they care about. The charters of both Hezbollah and Hamas and ISIS calls itself ISIL originally, Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. The Levant includes all of Israel. Make no mistake, what all the Arabs want, and I show clips of this in my lectures. There's a very fiery imam when Mohammed Morsi was running by the Muslim Brotherhood for the presidency of Egypt, and he ascended to that role. Now he's been deposed and he's on a death watch. I mean, he's been sentenced to death by a more moderate regime. But Morsi sat there in Tahrir Square. Thousands, tens of thousands of people are in Tahrir Square, and this fiery imam gets up in the name of Higazi. Fakwa Higazi, I believe. Higazi's the last name. And this guy is screaming at the top of his lungs. I shouted from the Delta, from the heart of Egypt, that our capital will not be Mecca or Medina. Our capital will be Al-Quds. And Al-Quds, of course, is the Arabic name for Jerusalem. That's the capital. And then they all chant, to Jerusalem we go, martyrs in the millions. the 6 o'clock news, you will not see that video on the 6 o'clock news. And when I show that to people at the conferences, they sit there like this, jaw on the ground, absolutely dumbfounded. It's like, why hasn't anyone told me about what's really going on over there? It's like, Fred and Barney Flintstone. I mean, that's what it is. Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble. Hey, Wilma. I mean, that's what they're into. They're just like, they've got these blinders on and no one's told them. So they have no idea of what's going on. In Egypt, when Morsi was elected, okay, and I'm going somewhere with this. When Morsi was elected at a soccer game, at the intermission of a soccer game, they unfurled at halftime this huge banner, "One nation under a new Holocaust." I'm not making this up. So how do you sit down with people like this that pose an existential threat to you, to your children, to everything that you stand for? You can't. And that's what people don't understand, that Israel was surrounded by nations who pose a direct existential threat. Netanyahu gets it. Now we've got the Ruskies under Tsar Vladimir coming down into the Middle East, meddling. Syria, Damascus. There's another ancient prophecy. Damascus, Isaiah 17, will become a ruinous heap. I've got pictures on my blog of a Russian drone that flew over parts of Damascus. It is absolutely reduced to rubble.
Oh, no, I've seen that.
There's nothing left. It's reduced to rubble.
Yes, it is.
And all this ties back into the biblical prophetic narrative that warns us this is exactly what we're going to see in the latter days. There's a prophecy that says Jerusalem will become a burdensome stone to the whole world. No one gave a rip about Jerusalem. You go back 100 years, no one could care about it. I mean, I've got pictures from 100 years ago. There's nobody there. It's a wasteland. There's no trees. The whole place has been denuded. That's what the Turks did. There's nothing. It's a wasteland. Swamps and marshes. That's all you got. Swamps, marshes, and deserts. That's it. And this trickle of Jews come back in. It's their land. It's always been their land. And in the fulfillment of prophecy, 1948, Israel becomes a nation. Absolutely unprecedented, which sets off the biblical prophetic clock. And that thing's been ticking ever since.
Okay. Yeah. Well, would you be surprised that actually the worst does not happen?
No.
What, you would not be surprised that the worst does not happen?
No, I will be terribly surprised if the worst does not happen.
If the worst did not happen.
Yeah, I think we're running towards it. We're not casually walking towards it. We're running towards this event. And I can go around the globe and give you why, but go ahead.
No. I know you can, and we may get into that. I mean, we are all aware. I think those watching this, what a bad state the world is in.
Yeah.
Without having to pretend that it's not. But what if certain things don't come to pass because they don't, for whatever reasons, that they are the greater reasons than what we can understand? That we may be in a different parallel timeline to what was predicted, or whatever it may be. There is always that what if, or maybe with what you're doing, that somehow awareness is brought through from people like yourselves and things are avoided.
Bully for that. I hope you're right. I would applaud that. That's what I want. But there's a phrase that I've coined, and I'll say it to you here. What was written will come to pass. What was foretold will unfold. And these events that we are seeing were written thousands of years ago in the biblical prophetic narrative. And now in these last days, or at least what I believe are the last days, these prophecies are unfolding right before our eyes in ways that I never would have imagined. And so I can only look from what I see. And from what I see, we are headed towards a climax. It's ramping up. Things are building up to some kind of a climax. I'm at a date center. I have no idea when we'll see the climax, but I think part of that's going to be World War III, more than likely in the Middle East. Will we see an electromagnetic pulse weapon used in the United States, which would be absolutely horrific and detrimental to all life over here? It would change the cultural fabric of this country. We're already seeing something which is absolutely unprecedented in your neck of the woods. An influx of about 1 million Muslims into Europe. And all my friends talk about this. This is, not something that we hide away from. Yes. This is huge. and it's unprecedented, and it's going to change the very cultural fabric of the entire continent. There's a clip I showed on my blog this morning, lamarzulli.wordpress.com. I'm just going to read what this says. This is what this guy, this Islamist in Germany. Islam is coming to take over Germany whether you want it or not. Not through war, but by the fact that Germans don't reproduce and Muslims have 7 to 8 children each. Absolutely true. But not only that, your daughters will marry bearded Muslims and wear the hijab. Their sons will wear a beard. The Muslims will have 4 wives and 27 children. And what does the German man have? 1 child and maybe a little pet dog. The German has taken advantage of the Muslim for too long, just so he can drive his Mercedes. Now Islam is coming and your daughters will wear the hijab. Ha, I can see the look of hate in your eyes. This is a quote from a Muslim in Germany. And let me read this quote to you again just to make sure that you got it. Islam is coming to take over Germany whether you want it or not. Not through war, but by the fact that Germans don't reproduce and Muslims have 7 to 8 children each. But not only that, your daughters will marry bearded Muslims and wear the hijab. Their sons will wear a beard. The Muslims will have 4 wives and 27 children. And what does the German man have? 1 child and maybe a little pet dog. The German has taken advantage of the Muslims for too long, just so he can drive his Mercedes. Now Islam is coming and your daughters will wear the hijab. Ha, I can see the look of hate in your eyes. What people don't understand, and we need to begin to raise our voices against it, Islam is not a religion. Islam is a fascist ideology. And what it seeks to do in any country that it rests in is to dominate the culture and the people and insist on their way of life. They do not want to assimilate, and you can see it in all the demonstrations that you have in your neck of the woods, specifically in the UK and all throughout Europe. If you are a Jew and you walk through a Muslim neighborhood, or if you have a car with a Israel sticker on it, guaranteed your car will be totally destroyed in any of the countries in Europe if you leave it in a Muslim section. This is what we're looking at, and it's coming over here. And the fact that 1 million Muslims are marching through Europe is basically an invasion force. And people are beginning to wake up and understand what they are facing. And now we discover that many of these so-called refugees have vanished into thin air. So now we don't know where they are. All I can tell you is in this country, we are so politically correct and so stupid the last 8 years under the guy that we have in the White House, that when Major Hassan took his weapon and walked into an army hospital, and all these people were there that were unarmed, and killed 13 people, including a pregnant woman who pleaded with Hassan not to kill her baby, just cut her down in cold blood, yelling Allahu Akbar the whole time. God is great. He performed a jihad, and yet our government under this president refused to call that terrorism. Instead, they called it workplace violence. Nonsense. And we need to come to grips as a world that what we are dealing with is Islamofascism, which is incredibly dangerous to everyone who wants freedom. The freedom that we know, the freedom that we love, the jurisprudence of what our country here in the United States, our Constitution, Sharia law is exactly the opposite of our Constitution, and people need to wake up.
Hasn't it always been the case on this planet that a lot of the major wars are due to religion, in a sense? My religion's right, your religion's wrong. Mine is the only way, and yours is wrong. It's always the problem, isn't it? You know, we just cannot get on and just come from a point of how much have I loved today, how much have I been of service today to others, how much have I made, tried to improve my life and others in that process. It doesn't take much for us to get on. I mean, when I used to live in other parts of the UK, there were multiracial cities, and people would just get on.
Right.
Yeah?
Sure.
Everyone got on. Now, when I spoke a moment ago about my friends talk about the influx of immigrants, mainly from the perspective, not from the Muslim side of it in some sense, but more from the where are they all going to go perspective. Yeah. But then, when you see their country, where they're coming from, the honest majority of them are maybe fleeing to try to better themselves, yeah. But there are a lot of those men of working age who, just,
Yeah.
seem to be well financed and everything else. And you think, well, they've just come from the country that's been destroyed. How is that possible? But then, you don't get to see daily footage of what really is going on over there, in a sense. So it is only what your media's telling you. Oh Christ, I mean, where is the solution in all this then? I mean, where is the love aspect of all this?
Well, I mean, the love aspect, isn't it interesting that the Saudi Arabians are Muslims themselves? And the Saudis, most people don't know this, the Saudis have erected a tent city in Saudi Arabia, which can hold upwards of 3 million people. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention that tent city is also air conditioned. The Saudi Arabians, as far as I know, have taken very few, if any, of the so-called refugees from Syria. So, the Turks don't want them. The Jordanians have had it up here. They go to Europe because they know multiculti, people like Merkel and others, will welcome them, and they'll take advantage of the situation. They'll take advantage of the free stuff that the government will give them. And so, how do we reach out? How do we make it work? There's no short answer to that, except why isn't the other Muslim countries that surround these countries willing to take them in? And they're not. They're not willing to take in their own people. And this gets back into the schism between Shia and Sunni Muslim, which has gone on for 1,300 years. Every 10 to 14 days in Iraq, another suicide bomber detonates him or herself, killing scores of people. What that is sectarian violence. It's the age-old 1,300-year schism between Sunni and Shia Muslim. They hate each other. And once there's no Jews or Christians left to kill, they start killing each other. I'm not making this stuff up. That's what we're faced with. Ask yourself this. Look at the Middle East. Look at all the trouble in the world. Where is it centered? It's all centered in the Middle East. What is it centered around? It's centered around Islam. And then look at Israel. The only democracy in that whole culture, the entire area where people thrive, they celebrate life. All the surrounding countries, Iran, death to America, death to Israel. Hezbollah, they now have 130,000 rockets aimed at Israel. Hamas with the terrorist tunnels. It's a culture of death. They celebrate death. They want to be martyred for Allah, and that's what people don't get. It's an ideology which refuses to coexist with any other ideology which goes against it. Which is why Christian churches are being burnt, Christians are being beheaded, Christians are being killed, and they're fleeing for their lives. We don't hear doodly squat about that, but that's what's going on.
And I'm not justifying any of that to say
No,
that I mean, I find that it's disgusting. It is appalling what other man can do to its fellow mankind. It's just unbelievable that we lose our connection of who we are because we are so addicted to the truth of one book, that this is the only way, that there's no other way, and we're not allowed to think outside the box, that there may be, possibly, we may have got it wrong. Because how can any loving God or creator want us or need us to justify such actions, or would even crave for a progression to go through such things? With stuff like the way the world is right now, for myself, I have to really look at things through a different perspective, and try to see things differently, because the way we have been thinking maybe isn't working so well. Yeah. I mean, I know you probably can't go down that road so much because of obviously being, you're a Christian, and you have your own truth, and that's the only way for you, which is fine, because I'm not taking that away from you. I'm just saying that maybe, well, as a Christian, then what is the solution? How can we fix our planet? How can we better our mankind?
Well, again, this all goes back to the biblical prophetic narrative, and my hope is the return of the king, which is a major regime change. If I am right, and the biblical narrative, biblical prophetic narrative is correct, the king is going to return at some point. All this is in the biblical prophetic narrative. It's written down with such specificity that a 13-year-old can read it and understand it. The regime change, and what we need to understand, is that we are in a battle zone. And there are entities, fallen entities on this planet who control the planet and basically want the enslavement of all mankind. These entities come to rob, kill, and destroy. That narrative is, again, in the biblical, or that statement is directly from the biblical prophetic narrative. We know that this war will continue until the rider on the white horse comes in. And all this sounds like a fairy tale. It sounds like a J.R.R. Tolkien Lord of the Rings book, but it's true. I can assure you. At some point in the future, because all the other signs are ticking, all the biblical prophecies. Look, you talk about the book. Let's just pretend that I'm not a Christian. And all I know is that there's a series of prophetic utterances which have come to pass. There's no other book on the planet, including Nostradamus or Edgar Cayce, who's about 60, I'm being generous here, 60% correct, and often the quatrains in Nostradamus are so fuzzy they can mean anything. We look at biblical prophecy, and we see that in the latter days, when I regathered you from the four corners of the earth, a nation dwelling in safety without bars or gates or walls. That's in the Ezekiel 38 passage. That is called out with great specificity. And guess what it's talking about? It's talking about an influx of nations, specifically Gog, which we believe is Russia. Guess who's in the Middle East right now? So what we're looking at in the biblical narrative, the biblical prophetic narrative, is these prophecies which are listed with great specificity. There's no other book that's got this 4,000-year-old thread of prophetic language from Genesis to Revelation that calls out the end before the beginning and the beginning before the end with such specificity as this book does. So, I mean, let's just pretend, you and I are not anything. We're just looking for truth, and we stumble on this book that tells us, in the latter days, I will gather the children of Israel from the four corners of the earth and settle them back in their ancient homeland. Let's pretend it's 1901, and you and I are reading this, and we look around and go, well, that's never going to happen. Are you kidding me? That's all run by the Ottomans. And yet 48 years later, it happens. That's what I'm talking about. Things that are called out, events that are called out well in advance, a priori, by someone who's living outside space-time. So the answer to this is the return of the king, because he brings a regime change. He destroys the prince of this world. Hallelujah. And when he does so, he brings his kingdom on the earth. And that's going to be, and I've often wondered this, people go, well, what happens next? Will we have Skype? Will we have cell phones? Will we have cars? I don't know the answers to any of these questions. It's going to be very interesting. I know that the earth has just gone through a very tumultuous period of time. Much of it, a third is destroyed, a third of the water is polluted, a third of the grass has been burned up, a third of the fish are dead. I mean, billions, at least 2 billion people are killed in this dreadful, crazy war thing that happens, because that's what happens. But when the king returns, everything begins to change, and that's my hope, because you're not going to change the ideology of the mullahs in Iran. You're not going to change the ideology of Kim Jong-un. You're not going to change him. You're not going to change Vladimir Putin, Tsar Vladimir, who thinks he's, the next czar and wants to restore Russia to her former glory. You're not going to change this stuff. You're not going to change Hezbollah's charter or Hamas's charter. You're not going to do that. So you're at an impasse. You're at an impasse. And that only means, it means only one thing. Unless an absolute miracle happens, and I'm not holding my breath on that one, you're looking at a third world war between Islam and Israel. That's what it's going to be. Between Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, the surrounding nations that surround Israel. And it's going to be really nasty, and it's going to be it's not going to go on for 4 or 5 years. It's going to be very short, very protracted. I would also predict there may be tactical nukes that are used.
Now, someone commented in a previous video that we did together that, hey man, that L.A. Marzulli, he's very, much in the fear, very, very much in the negatives, all negative, negative, negative. Where is there anything positive in what he's saying?
Good point. Okay, let me switch gears. The reason why I do this, and the reason why it's negative, let me just go down the laundry list again, all right? And you tell me where I'm going wrong. Is there enough? And I just want a yes or no answer from you, Kevin. Are we getting an uptick in earthquakes? Are we seeing more earthquakes, and earthquakes which are greater, like the 9.0s that we see in let's say Haiti or Fukushima or Chile?
Yes.
Okay. What about the wars and rumors of wars, where we see right now there are, over a score of wars on this planet where we're seeing killings and beheadings and absolute atrocities going on, and the war machine continues. In Afghanistan, 14 years there, and there's $1 trillion opium harvest every year. So what are we to make of that? Is there, not that there's an uptick in wars, but we're living with all these wars around us. Would you agree?
Yes, I would.
Then you look at the Fukushima disaster, where we were told by TEPCO and the Japanese government, everything's fine, nothing to worry about. Just continue to drive your Prius and have your double latte at Starbucks, and everything will be cool. Now we discover, and this was on my blog today, which is absolutely unprecedented from Fukushima, but reactor 2, you can't get within so many feet of it or you're dead in less than 24 hours. The radiation is spilling into the Pacific. This is unprecedented. It's unprecedented. Would you agree?
Yes, I would.
The United States is $19 trillion in debt. Some people are looking at the imminent collapse of the petrodollar, the U.S. petrodollar. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, all are harboring and coalesce together to try to bring an end to the petrodollar and have the world's global currency, default currency, become the Chinese yuan. We are looking at a possible complete financial meltdown on a global level. I'm not making this up. Then you look at the fish and animal die-off. 160,000 antelopes in Kazakhstan 2 weeks ago? They just dropped dead in a field. So, I can keep going. With 1 billion abortions on the planet. 1 billion. Think about that. 1 billion. And then you got Planned Parenthood, which is talking about selling the body parts, of live fetuses, which are, we didn't kill this one, but we can get its heart. Are you kidding me? This is something Mengele would have loved to do in the Third Reich at Auschwitz, for crying out loud. Volcanic activity, off the charts right now, off the charts. So all I'm doing as a watchman is pointing out and trying to wake up people and warn people what is coming down, where we are. We can have two choices: live with our head in the sand, have a pint every night after work, watch the football game and pretend all is well, or come to grips with the fact, the overwhelming fact, that all this was written in the biblical prophetic narrative 2,000 years ago by Jesus himself, and he warned us, and this is what he says, not what I say. He says this: when you see these things begin to happen, everything that we're talking about, look up, because I'm coming back. That's our hope.
But there must be a way that we can, there must be a message that we can give out in this interview that can help to avoid it, rather than just to wait for the return of a Messiah. Surely there's something we can do now where we can take responsibility, rather than saying that we're completely powerless to do nothing.
Well, we're not completely powerless, and that's why I do what I do, and I fight back. When I look at the Republican debate, I blogged about that. I fought back as best as I can. When I see the weasels in Washington tap dance around whatever they're tap dancing around, or let's say raising the budget, I fight back. I'm not laying down here. When I hear about an honor killing in America, I let people know about that. I let people know about female genital mutilation and how we shouldn't allow this.
All important
it's an absolute atrocity. And on it goes. So I am living it. I am pushing back against the cultural paradigm as much as possible. I wrote a blog about Halloween and how we should not practice it, and how its roots are in witchcraft and demonology, and it can open the gate to all sorts of things. So I'm pushing back constantly and trying to give people hope. The hope I have is the return of the Messiah. But in the meantime, open dialogue with people. Everybody I meet, that's the person I focus on for that particular moment in time, because that's all I got.
Yeah, absolutely. If you could take, and this is going to be probably impossible, but if you took Christianity out of this and came from a different perspective, is there any other solution that could be possible? Just putting religion to one side as well.
If I were a globalist, I would look at this, and isn't this interesting, because this is also prophesied in the biblical prophetic narrative, okay? But if I were a globalist, I would say, this is what we must do. We must create a one world government, because things are out of control and everything is lopsided. One country has too many resources, another country has none. We need to somehow globalize things and bring everyone under an umbrella. We need to have a one world governmental system where we can control the populace, control birth control, basically the Georgia Guidestones. We need to bring the population way down to a manageable level. We need to stop the religious wars. I mean, that's what I would say. And that's what they're doing. I mean, they're already doing that. And that's where it's going to go. That's why it's moving towards this one world government, a one world religious system, probably with the Vatican as its head. I mean, that's just speculation.
Sure, sure. Have you ever studied the works of anyone like Neil Donald Walsh or Eckhart Tolle?
Eckhart Tolle I'm familiar with. And again, this is basically a humanistic approach, and it sounds really good. The problem is the basic nature of a human being is one of depravity.
Eckhart Tolle would not go down the. Eckhart Tolle would say something completely. There would be a different solution that Eckhart Tolle would present in this moment. I think, and it wouldn't.
But it would be humanistic. That's my point.
It could be.
It would be man's solution. And my point is this, that all we need to do is look at the 6 o'clock news and look at everything we've just talked about. And man, in my opinion, is basically depraved. And we all have that depraved nature within us. And it comes out for most of us. Most of us have learned to not do depraved things. And we understand that. But the basic nature, that's why we have the wars and the killings and the insanity on this planet. That is our basic nature. And given, look, you know that, and I know, that if you didn't have bobbies on every corner, you'd have total anarchy. You know that. And I know that.
Yes.
That's why there's a police force in every town, in every city in the United States and everywhere else. Because without the police, given 15 minutes, crime, the criminal element will rise to the top, and you'll have total anarchy and total lawlessness. We see it graphically demonstrated when Katrina hit in the United States here. And I'll just use that as an example. But you can go anywhere, and any time that police force is removed, man's depravity comes floating up to the top, and we have total anarchy and lawlessness. That's where I differ with Eckhart Tolle, because in order to have Tolle's thing work from a humanistic standpoint, you've got to change the basic nature of a human being. And there's only one way to do that I've found, and that's up there.
You know, I mean, I interview so many various different people, and you know, some really different people as well, and there's a lot that say that as a soul, we are here to have an experience. We have chosen to be here, and it's a very special place to come to. And there is no judgment. There is no, in a sense, beyond this understanding that it's going to be difficult to get into this understanding, but there is no wrong or right in some sense. That when we go back home, that everything, you know, it comes back clear to us again that we chose to have certain experiences here, be it as we may judge it good or bad on this level right now. And I wonder sometimes how much truth there is in that. I'd like to think there is. And I'd like to think that there's a bigger reason for everything. And, you know, I don't know exactly what the end result of your work is going to be, whether it all comes to pass or not. I'd like to think, for my own truth, that there is a bigger reason for these events happening, and it's not all doom and gloom in a sense.
Let me address that in a couple of ways. Let's pretend that right now you and I are in the middle of the Third Reich's reign. We're stuck in Germany or France. We're under the German rule in France, and we see the atrocities go on, and we're there. And our hope is that someone would liberate us. Well, you can take that exact same scenario and plug it into the global condition that we're in, because there is a very dark regime which controls this planet.
I do believe that. I do believe that. Yes, of course, yeah. I agree with you completely.
And these are the Luciferians, the ones that follow this character. And this is why we're headed towards a one world government and one world religious system. Regarding the fact that there is no right or wrong, if that's the case, then what do we do with the Mengele? What do we do with the Death Angel of Auschwitz? What do we do with someone who comes into your house and blows everybody away? That is a heinous act. And to say that it's not good or evil is basically throwing everything under the bus that Western civilization is based on. Of course, there's a good and there's an evil. I mean, a 7-year-old can discern that.
I think on this level there's there's polar opposites, because without them, how the hell are we going to have an experience here that we do? I mean, if it's all just one way, there's no opposing opposites, there's no experience. Maybe we've come here to have experience. I mean, they're very big concepts, because we won't know until we've gone home, in a sense. Well, what was if that was the case or not, but. I think sometimes they can get a bit ahead of themselves, these concepts as well, because how do we make that difference now? What are we going to do that's going to make a difference now to the way things are? I contemplate these questions a lot. How can I make a difference in the world now that's going to help? And sometimes I think really it can come down to just, if I make my life good and I make the life and those around me, I can spread a little bit of love to as well, and and help. Then that's all I can do right now. I know what you're trying to do on this bigger, grander scale by doing your TV show, which you're launching in January, and all the best of luck with that as well. I know it'll do well. I know you're trying to do your bit from the perspective that you're coming from. But I think as a Christian as well, I think it's at the core of most religions there is love. Yeah, I know that it's got its own sets of rules for different things, and I'm not going to get into those right now. But I think what can you do as a Christian, with that love aspect of your religion in this work?
Well, what is interesting is that in certain Muslim countries, specifically Iran, and in fact in Watchers 9 we interviewed a man who was completely anonymous, we don't even know his real name, who is a pastor in Iran, and he told us that Christianity is the #1 enemy from the mullahs in Iran. They fear Christianity in Iran more than anything, because Christianity is changing people away from Islam, and you know that when you leave Islam, it's punishable by death. So there's not a lot of love there if you leave Islam. But there's mullahs and imams and Muslims who are converting by the thousands in Iran because Jesus is appearing to them. They're supernatural. Let me tell you one story. We talked about this in Watchers 9. There's this guy who lives out in the desert in Iran and lives in a one-room hut, no running water, no electricity. He's got a candle, a little fireplace, a little stove to cook stuff on. One night there's a knock on the door. Guy's in the middle of nowhere, no neighbors. I mean, he's a hermit. This man there, white robe, face is really glowing, shining. Can I come in? The guy invites him in. He sits down and he starts dictating to this man, who gets a pencil and paper and starts writing all this stuff down. He falls asleep. Man's gone when he wakes up in the morning. Next night, same time, knock on the door happens. Same guy. This goes on for 30 days. So this story gets back because this man tells him he's got a ream of paper with all this words. He doesn't know what he's got. Tell me what this means. What is this? Why did I get this? Because he doesn't know. So this pastor, this Iranian pastor, goes out to see this guy, invites him in, shows him the stack of paper, and what's on there is the book, the Gospel of John in Farsi. That's crazy. That is absolutely off the charts, miraculously crazy. The Gospel of John in Farsi. I would love to get a copy of that somehow, and we've requested it, but who knows? But that's what's happening in the middle of all this chaos, because it is chaos. You're also getting some miraculous stuff that's happening. So with that in mind, look, as a Christian, I'm told to love everyone, and I do, no matter where they're at or who they are.
That's right.
Or what they are.
That's right.
But that doesn't make me a doormat.
No, of
and
course
it doesn't,
not.
Doesn't make me a doormat.
But it shouldn't do.
Yeah, of course not. But it does. What it enables me to do is, no matter who I'm with or what I'm with or what I'm doing, I can try or I can practice love. And I can't. What's interesting is I can't generate that. That comes from Him through me by the power of His Spirit. And when we walk in the Spirit of a living God, that's what excites me. That's what changes our life. That's what changes, the atmosphere around us. that changes everything. And it's incredible. When the Spirit of a living God comes into a person, just by asking, the Spirit of a living God can come in by asking, okay, I've screwed up. Jesus died for me. I get it. I get it. Come into my life and change it. He will do that. But it's a conscious effort. Most people are afraid to do it, or they won't do it, or say, well, why do I have to do that? And so they never get up to the line. But many people do get up to the line. And when they finally cross that line, life begins in a different way. And the bottom line is, that really is, I know it sounds religious, and I know it sounds like it's banging the party line drum here, but the bottom line is that's the hope of the world. Because unless you deal with the human depravity, unless there's some way of dealing with our own depravity, our own wickedness, right, then nothing's going to change here. I mean, what do you do with a corrupt politician? You know, what do you do with a child molester? You know, the pedophilia in the Vatican and all this other nonsense. I mean, how you can't correct that. You can't legislate it. You can't. You've got to change the core belief system. You got to change the heart. And that doesn't happen unless it comes, the whole miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yes, you have got to change the heart. You're right there. You have got to change the heart.
Yeah, the whole miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm not an alcoholic, okay? But I've studied it because I have friends who were alcoholics. And the miracle of that is they go there, and here they are, they're drinking a fifth of gin a day or whatever it is, right? This is it. They're going to die unless they change. And they surrender. And they just go, look, I don't know who you are, God, whoever you may conceive him to be. Just come into my life and change it, because I'm helpless. I'm broke. I'm powerless. I'm addicted. And the miracle happens, and they wake up, and it's different with every person. And all of a sudden, it's gone. Let me just close by saying this. I have a friend who was addicted to methamphetamines for 20 years.
Yeah.
This guy's in a jail cell, right? In a jail cell. This is rock bottom. Waiting to be sentenced by a judge the next morning. He gets on his knees. He doesn't even know how to pray. And he just cries out to Jesus and to help him. He's delivered from the meth immediately. All of a sudden he can think again. The cravings are gone. He's delivered from the meth. The next morning, he's in front of the judge. He's got 3 felonies charged against him. He's expecting to be sent up the river for 20 years. The judge looks at him and goes, I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm going to put you on probation. Ba-beep, ba-bop, ba-beep. And the guy is like, he's a pastor now, turned his whole life around. That's the kind of miracle that happens. That's the good news. That's not religion. That's relationship. And that's what it's all about.
Okay, I know we're almost at the end. Okay, let me just add to that as well, which I hope I'm adding something here that's logical. But what if there was a race out there, an extraterrestrial race? There's probably many, right? But a race in general that has found peace, yeah, and they've done it because they've evolved from once where we are now, in a sense, not exactly where we are, but the same ideology, that they've gone past where they were in a religious point of view to something different, and you know it's worked for them. I don't know. I mean, you know, is our thinking totally screwy? Have we got something wrong? And I keep coming to that.
We do, and I keep going back to that. Unless man is dealt with and his basic nature, his basic fallen nature.
As you've
why
said,
is it?
Okay.
Why is it that a little child knows how to lie? Where does that come from? Well, you know, and then he's taught that's a lie. Don't do that. And then he realizes that if I lie, what I'm doing is deliberately twisting the truth. And that's why a lie is so heinous. See what I'm getting at?
I do. And in this,
how do you change that?
Well, in this interview, I purposefully left out many ideas of spirituality here as well, because I do want this to be your space, and I'm not going to try to convince you, you know, of anything else. I will say this. Maybe as a Christian doing this TV show that you're about to do as well, maybe at the end of each show, you know, you could send out love and light to people like ISIS, to love and light to people like Hamas, to love and light to people that are causing darkness on this planet, to try to help heal them. I mean, what else can you do sometimes? That's
it. Well, and that's the power of prayer. Like when I pray for the missionaries in Iran, that's what I'm doing. You know, when I pray for ISIS to somehow Father, is there a way you can reach them?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm, you talk about sending love and light. That's what prayer is, and that's what I do constantly.
Good.
I'm constantly praying for a variety of issues, people, places, and things.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're completely, beyond my scope or reach of influencing them on any type of human level. So it's got to come from an outside force.
And that's it. Yeah, absolutely. And well, that's well, you're doing what you feel's right, and no one should tell you any different. And I applaud you for that. So,
well, thank you, Kevin.
I know this interview has gone completely different to what I thought it was going to go, right? But I think it's it's not the easiest of subjects. These are not.
Well, and here's the deal. And I'll use this analogy because it's close to home where you are. With all due respect, when Neville Chamberlain came back after talking with